Hello guys, welcome back to the MedLife. In this video, we are going to talk about the cell. Let's start. So first of all, what is a cell? A cell is the smallest unit of all living organisms. So now let's see what are the characteristics of a cell. So as we said, it's the smallest unit of all living organisms. So all organisms have the cells, and there are different types of cells. Now let's see what are the characteristics that make a cell look like a cell. So first of all, it needs nutrition and oxygen. Just as we know, like a living organism, an organism needs food and oxygen for breathing. The same thing with the cell. We have respiration in the cell through the oxygen, and nutrition, which we have the food and different substances. And the cell produces its own energy, which we'll call later on. The energy stored in the cell is the mitochondrium, and we'll go to that later on. And it eliminates carbon dioxide and other metabolic waste. Just like an organism, just like human beings, the cell eats, it needs nutrient food. Then it gives out carbon dioxide. And it maintains the medium, such as the environment, to survive. So the cell has some like unique characteristics, and which is maintaining the medium, the temperature, the things like that to survive. And it shows immediate response to the entry of invaders like bacteria or toxic substances into the body. So the cells, this is specific to majorly the white blood cells and the immune cells and different types of WBCs that protect the body. So when something enters in the body, in the cell that is not supposed to enter, the cell fights with it and just sends a response. And it reproduces by division. We know, like, we have different cell division like mitosis and meiosis and stuff like that for cell division. So it reproduces and it duplicates, becomes more and more. So now let's go through the organization. So first we have the cell, as I said, the smallest unit of all living organisms. And then we have the tissue. So a tissue is a group of cells that are located in a similar place with a similar function. They're like each other, and they have the same function. They provide a similar function. And an organ is made up of similar tissues. And an organ system is a group of organs with related functions that work together. And an organism is a living thing, which is made up of different organ systems. So if we take an example of, let's say, cardiovascular system. So the cell would be the cardiac cell. Then the tissue would be the cardiac tissue. The organ will be the heart. The organ system will be the cardiovascular system. And the organism would be the human, or any living organism that has a cardiovascular system. So this is how the system works. Now, let's go through the structure of a cell, or the anatomy of the cell. How is a cell? What is the structure of a cell? So first of all, the cell has a cell membrane. A cell membrane is a sheath that covers the cell. It separates the intracellular fluid from the extracellular fluid, the outside of the cell from the inside the cell. It's just like a membrane, just like a wall. Then the cytoplasm. The cytoplasm is inside the cell, like this fluid you can see, which holds the organelles. And then we have the nucleus. So we have different organelles in the cell, and which the main and the most important is the nucleus. So the nucleus is the center of the cell. You can say the brain of the cell, the head of the cell that controls, that sends signals and controls the cell. So in this video, majorly we are going to talk about the cell membrane. So as I said, it's a sheath that covers the cell, and it separates the extracellular fluid, which is the out of the cell, from the intracellular fluid, which is inside the cell. And it's semi-permeable, which means it allows only some substances to enter the cell through some signaling and some stuff, and it doesn't allow some other stuff, some pathogens and stuff like that, to enter the cell. So that's why we call it semi-permeable. It's permeable to only some substances, not everything. Then now let's go to the function of the cell membrane. What does the cell membrane do? First of all, it protects. As we said, like it's a wall, and we know walls protect stuff. So the cell membrane protects the cytoplasm and the organelles located inside the cell. And its selective permeability. So it has, as I said, it's permeable to only some substances. It is a semi-permeable membrane, which allows only some substances to enter the cell, and it's a barrier to other substances. And it has a absorptive function, which some nutrients are absorbed into the cell through the cell membrane and through some we call receptors and stuff like that. Then it has excretory function. It secretes, it metabolizes and other waste products, as I said, like the carbon dioxide or other like waste products, that after its metabolism, which are waste products which are not needed in the cell anymore, it just secretes them, excretes them out of the cell. And exchange of gases like oxygen, when oxygen enters in the cell through the blood, and so it gets the oxygen through the blood, and it gives out the carbon dioxide. So this is a gas exchange functioning. And maintenance of the shape and size of the cell. It maintains, as imagine a wall, or imagine a house. So it has walls around and a door and a window and stuff like that. So these walls shape that house. They give the shape of the house, how far that room can go, how far that kitchen can go and stuff like that. So it just gives the shape and the size of their body, like how far it can go, how big it can be, or how small it can be. And the shape, how the cell looks like. It's the cell membrane that gives the shape of the cell. The cell membrane is made up of three main products. We have the proteins, lipids, and carbohydrates. So around 55% of the cell membrane is made up of proteins, around 45% is made up of lipids, and 5% is made up of carbohydrates. So the major thing located in the cell membrane is the proteins, the lipids, and then carbohydrates. Now let's start with the lipid layer. So it has phospholipids and cholesterol. So the lipid layer is a semi-permeable membrane, as we already said, and it allows only fat-soluble substances. Remember that. So they have opposite work. The lipid layer and the protein layer, they have opposite work. So the lipid layer only and only allows the fat-soluble substances like oxygen, carbon dioxide, and alcohol. Only fat-soluble. And on the other side, the protein layer only allows the water-soluble substances like glucose, urea, electrolytes. And these fat-soluble cannot pass through the protein layer, and the water-soluble substances cannot pass through this lipid layer. So let's go through the phospholipid layer. There are so many phospholipids located in the cell membrane, which are here in this slides. We have shown them. And as you can see in this picture, in these slides, aminophospholipids, sphingomyelins, and all these ones, they're the phospholipids. So the lipid layer of the cell membrane is a bilayer, which means it's made up of two main substances. So one is the head, which we call the hydrophilic head, and the other one is the tail, and which we call the hydrophobic tails. So the heads, which are hydrophilic, which means they're water soluble and they are in touch with water. So as you know, outside the cell we have extracellular fluid, and inside the cell we have the intracellular fluid. As you can see, this one, intracellular fluid. So they deal with water, they're hydrophilic. And on the other side, they deal with the extracellular fluid. So there's also fluid there, it's a water. So they deal with water, so they are hydrophilic. And the tails, the hydrophobic tails, they're located inside, inside the cell membrane, like in the inner side. And they're just like tails, and they are pointed towards each other from the other surface and from this surface. So they're located towards each other, and they're far away from the water. You can see they don't deal with water. They're surrounded with the heads, the hydrophilic heads, which can be in contact with water. So that's why they're located inside the tails. So this is the phospholipid bilayer of the cell membrane. Now cholesterol. Cholesterol is a small substance that is located in between these tails, the hydrophobic tails of the cell membrane. You can see in this picture these yellow tails, they're the hydrophobic tails of the cell membrane of the phospholipid bilayer. And in between, you see the cholesterol. So the main function of the cholesterol is to maintain the shape of the cell membrane, and it helps to maintain the shape of this phospholipid bilayer. Now let's go to the proteins. The proteins are divided into two major categories, integral and peripheral. So in this picture, you can see this is an integral protein. An integral protein is a protein that is located in both surfaces of the cell membrane. The inner surface, which deals with the intercellular fluid, and the outer surface, which deals with the extracellular fluid. So it passes through the cell membrane, the entire cell membrane. You can see it from this surface to that surface. The peripheral surface is not like that. It's just the opposite. It's only located in one surface, either the intracellular or the extracellular. So it's either inside or outside. So let's see the functions of this. So it provides the structural integrity of the cell membrane. We already discussed that, the structure. And it helps in the diffusion of water-soluble substances. Remember, we're talking about the proteins of the cell membrane. So diffusion of water-soluble substances like glucose and electrolyte. So the lipid layer of the cell membrane deals with the fat-soluble, and the protein layer deals with only the water-soluble substances like glucose and electrolyte. And it helps in transport of substances across the cell membrane. That's what we call the transport. We have two kinds of transport, the active transport and the passive transport. We'll have another video on that, on the transport later on. And it acts as a pump which we have the sodium potassium pump and stuff like that. We'll discuss in the transport video, and by which like some ions are transported actively across the cell membrane. Some stuff are entered and some stuff are transported out of the cell membrane and the cell itself. And it serves as a receptor site of some hormones and neurotransmitters. So this protein layer is very important in this manner that like some hormones, when they come here, they bind to some proteins, to some integral or the peripheral proteins of the cell membrane, and they can enter and they can give the message, the hormones or the neurotransmitters. And it has a metabolic function. Some protein molecules from the enzyme and control chemical reactions within the cell membrane. So it has kind of a bit of metabolic function.